What a weekend in Miami. McLaren with a dominant performance, once again with a 1-2 in the sprint race and a 1-2 in Sunday's race. A little bit of a breakout weekend for Kimi Antonelli, some lap 1, turn 1 drama in both races, and some more headaches from Ferrari. We're about to go through everything we saw in South Florida this weekend, all coming up next on the Chicanery Podcast. All right, recording this a little bit behind schedule. Again, I was there this weekend, just got back home this afternoon. What a race to go to, and what an exciting weekend in Formula One. I want to start with Saturday, though, with the sprint race. Lando Norris gets lucky yet again with a safety car in Miami to take home the sprint win. Probably one of the most exciting sprint races we've had in a while. We went into this weekend thinking it would be dry on Saturday, and instead, we got the rain. And the excitement started before the race, with Charles Leclerc crashing on his warm-up lap to the grid. Just an embarrassing moment for him. But at the same time, to give him a little bit of the benefit of the doubt, the track conditions were tough at that time. With Miami being a street track, the water just kind of sits on the track until the sun comes out to dry things out. They really don't have good drainage systems on this track just yet. And it looked like Leclerc just hit one of those very wet spots and hydroplaned into the wall. So a tough break for him, out before the race even started. But let's start with the start of the race, and let's start with Kimi Antonelli. He takes pole for the sprint on Friday, making him the youngest driver to ever be on pole in a Formula One race. Now, I know the race results didn't turn out to be what he or the team wanted, but I feel like in a way, this weekend was a coming out party for him. He looked really strong all weekend long and was really outperforming George Russell during a lot of the sessions. Kimi is going to be a very special driver in this sport. We see it with these rookies when they come in. We saw it with Max Verstappen. We saw it with Oscar Piastri, most notably in recent years. You can tell when the talent is there, and you can tell when it's a special driver. And they have moments like this very early on. And Kimi is well on his way to stardom in Formula One. And he didn't make it happen this weekend, but I don't think it will be long before we see Kimi win a race. But the sprint race also started with Kimi and Oscar Piastri lining up next to him on the front row. They go into the first turn, side by side. Kimi goes off track and loses 3 places. He gets on the radio right away and says, "Hey, Oscar pushed me off." And of course, he and Mercedes are looking for a penalty. I don't know, though. It was close watching the replay, but it looked like Kimi bailed out of the corner on his own, opposed to being actually forced off track. And Oscar didn't give him a lot, but it looked like he gave him enough room. And obviously the stewards agreed with that and decided not to give Oscar a penalty for that lap 1 incident. A tough break for Kimi, but at the same time, a valuable learning moment for him that really every driver has to go through who's good enough to be at the front of the pack in competing for race wins. But after that moment, things calm down a little bit. And the rain stops, the track starts drying out, and then Yuki makes the bold decision to come in on lap 11 for slick tires, which really gave the rest of the teams the data they needed to realize, hey, it's time to make this switch. These tires are a lot faster in these conditions now. So teams start coming in, but we start getting the chaos on laps 13 and 14. It all happened so fast, it was really hard to keep up, especially there being on track. So it starts, we have Carlos clip the wall, which gives him a puncture. Brings out, I don't know if it brought out a virtual safety car, but obviously a moment there. And at the same time, we start to see these drivers come in and pit for the slick tires. And we have Max Verstappen come in. We have Kimi Antonelli come in, both into the pits at the same time. And then we have an incident where Red Bull releases Max into Kimi, which stops Kimi from actually making his pit stop. At the same time, while all this is happening, Lando's closing in on Oscar for first place. Oscar goes wide off track into the turn 15-16 chicane. And then, on lap 14, Liam Lawson pulls a Liam Lawson and takes out Fernando Alonso with, honestly, a pretty aggressive move down the inside. So at that point, the safety car comes out. It gives Lando the lead as he's coming out of the pits, and the race was essentially over at that point. With all of that, though, and again, all of this happening so fast, let's start with the Kimi and Max incident. Really, no fault on Max there. but all the fault on Red Bull. A pretty reckless move to release him out of the pits straight into Kimi's path. I don't think it was intentional. I think it was just a lapse in judgment. But what is going on with Red Bull's pit stops this year? A few years ago, they were flawless, and now we're seeing mistakes after mistakes, weekend after weekend. You have to wonder what's going on there. But you have to give credit to both drivers in that situation for really avoiding a serious incident with the pit crews all standing around right there. If Kimi decided to keep going, turning into the pits, there's a good chance he spins out, clips some of those pit crew members. It could have been a very, very ugly situation. So a lot of credit goes to both drivers for really just minimizing the damage in that situation. At the same time, Ferrari comes in, brings Lewis Hamilton in on lap 12, surprises us all with actually having a good strategy call, bringing Lewis in at that moment. But looking back at things, I don't see that as the reason why Lewis got all the way up to P3. Without that Kimi Max incident in the pits, both of those drivers probably stay ahead of Lewis pretty easily. Max gets a broken front wing from that incident, which slowed him down a lot, gave Lewis the opportunity to get past Max. And Kimi bailing out of that pit stop and having to come in a second time really just completely took him out of the picture. But hey, if you're a Ferrari fan, you take it. Now, obviously, going to the front of the pack, luck played into Lando's favor too, with the timing of the safety car. But without that happening, would he have won the race? Probably not. Look, Lando was the fastest car on track, not only on Saturday, but really all weekend. He was closing in on Oscar very quickly, and if everyone stayed out on inters, I think he passes Oscar pretty easily. We saw a little bit of those tire management issues from Oscar that have somewhat disappeared this season come back to life and come back to haunt him. He just burned through those tires way too quickly, and Lando did a great job of managing that stint on the inners. But with Oscar coming in for slick tires first, that would have put Lando way behind without a safety car, and the gap just would have been too big to make up in 5 laps. But after all of this, we basically get a finish under the safety car just because of the amount of debris and how difficult it was to recover Fernando Alonso's car in that part of the track. But what a thrilling finish and a big win for Lando to get a little bit of that momentum back for the championship fight. All right, let's go to Sunday. Just an absolutely dominant performance for McLaren. Oscar Piastri with his 4th win in 6 races this season, and a little luck played into his favor too, just like it did for Lando on Saturday, but Oscar really controlled the majority of the race. It did get a little close for him at the end as Lando took his lead from 9 seconds down to about 4, but I don't think Oscar was really under a serious threat from his teammate for the race win. At that point in the race, Lando was pushing full beans, and I highly doubt Oscar was giving it everything and was much more on the tire management side with his approach, especially after what he learned from Saturday. Let's start with that lap 1 incident between Max and Lando, though. Really just a messy weekend for Max overall, and this moment kind of capped it off for him. He beats Lando off the start and blocks him, which was completely fair, but he should have gotten a penalty for forcing Lando off track going into turn 3. Now, of course, whenever these moments happen, it's a discussion over who is ahead at the apex of the turn. I don't think that matters here. They make it through turn 1 fine, and they're side by side heading into the S's of turns 2 and 3. This is a flat out part of the track. There's no braking here, so throw the apex argument out the window. And Max clearly forced Lando off track, and if Lando didn't back off, Max would have sent him straight into the wall. I was really surprised that Max didn't get a penalty for that. It deserved a penalty, and it really took the win away from Lando. Now, the rest of Max's battles with the 2 McLarens, they were fair. He was defending beautifully. But after the race, Lando commented that Max wasn't driving very smart and ruined his race to an extent, and honestly, I agree with Lando. Max should have known he had no chance of keeping those 2 cars behind him. And while it gave us some really good wheel-to-wheel racing and was really excitement both in the stands and on TV, if Max doesn't do that, I think he easily stays ahead of George Russell, who only finished 2 seconds ahead at the end of the race. That moment cost Max a podium. Going back to McLaren, though, these cars are scary fast. I was there this weekend. Seeing the gap towards the end of the race between the McLarens and George Russell in 3rd was absolutely insane. At times, they were a second faster than everyone else on track. George Russell finished 37 seconds off the lead in third. The Ferraris finished 57 seconds behind Oscar in a 57 lap race. The pace that the McLarens have is incredible. I think this is bad news for the rest of the grid as we head into the summer. When it's hot like it was this weekend, they have such an advantage over the rest of the field. And I don't think this has anything to do with wing flexibility or anything that'll go away with the technical directive starting in Spain. This is all about tires and keeping them cool and making them last throughout a stint. I don't know what McLaren is doing. I don't think it's anything illegal like Red Bull thinks, but it is such an advantage for this team. Coming out of the weekend, Oscar extends his lead in the driver's standings to 16 points over Lando in second. A good weekend for Lando. A little left on the table, though. But I definitely don't think this championship fight is over for him. Oscar obviously still has the momentum on his side, but we saw Lando get back to his usual form, and I think he easily wins this race if he doesn't have that incident with Max on the first lap. Lando will be back on the top step of the podium soon enough, and he's going to have a say in this championship fight. Williams with a very strong performance on Sunday. Alex Albon finishes P5, Carlos Sainz finishes P9. These cars look strong all weekend long. This was a track that suits their car better than most, but to see this team in this position is just, it's very promising for their trajectory. And it's great for the sport, too, to just see another team with such a rich history work their way up the grid after so many disappointing seasons. Speaking of disappointing, though, Ferrari with another very disappointing weekend. Like I said earlier, they finished 57 seconds off of the lead, which is just depressing for them. I can't figure out this car, and they can't either. It's so inconsistent, and it seems like they go back and forth between a decent result and a bad result, but it's never a great result when it comes to a full race. I don't think anyone expected that Ferrari's battle would be with Williams at this point in the season. Not with McLaren, not with Red Bull, not with Mercedes. But outside of the car's lack of pace, Ferrari mismanagement from the pit wall strikes again. With about 25 laps to go, Lewis is behind Leclerc, with Lewis on the faster medium tires and Charles on the slower hard tires. Lewis jumps on the radio around lap 35 and basically suggests swapping places, and it should have been an easy decision for Ferrari to make that call and release Lewis into clean air. Ferrari finally swaps positions on lap 39, but those 4 laps behind Leclerc really ate up Lewis's tires. And that was evident after they made the swap, and Lewis was struggling to pull away after catching up to Leclerc so quickly and just showing a much faster pace. But then Leclerc jumps on the radio a few laps later, saying Lewis needs to pick up the pace and he's stuck in the dirty air. And then they swap the drivers again on lap 53. They also told Leclerc they were swapping back before they even said anything to Lewis, which was a little weird. And Lewis was pretty angry on the radio. And I don't really have a problem with it. This team has been screwing up their race strategies for years, and Lewis isn't here for it, and he's ready to hold them accountable. Ferrari shouldn't be in this position. They have all the tools they need to be successful, and they just can't get it right. Was this the end for Jack Doohan? His race on Sunday ended right away on the first lap with a pretty bad move, nosediving into Liam Lawson going into turn 1. Another disappointing result for him, and it looks like it might be his last result for at least some time. A lot of reports have come out after this race that Alpine is seriously considering swapping Jack Doohan for Franco Colapinto starting at the next race in Imola. It really looks like it's happening. This all feels eerily similar to what happened with Liam Lawson. We heard the reports before the season, we saw the writing on the wall with the contracts, and we've seen the headlines as the season's gone on. And now it looks like Doohan's time has run out. It sucks for him, only getting 6 race weekends to prove himself, but it's how this sport goes, and he really hasn't done himself any favors to give himself an argument as to why he should stay in that seat. A good Sunday result for Mercedes. George Russell finishes P3 and finds himself back on the podium for the 4th time this season. He's also now finished in the top 5 in every race. Kimi Antonelli finishes P6, a little disappointing for him, starting 3rd, but He's also showing a lot of consistency, especially for a driver so young and so inexperienced. For George, Mercedes made the right call with his tire strategy. Now, a little luck played into that with the virtual safety car, but starting on hards and going on to mediums while also getting a cheap pit stop under the VSC put him in a perfect position to hold off Max and take home that third place result. Some more tough learning moments for Kimi, though. He had some misfortune with his pit stop that put him within striking distance of Alex Albon, but Kimi had more trouble going long into turn one, which was a theme for him this weekend. But during the race, that gave Albon enough to get by him for fifth, and Albon ultimately held him off for that position. Not a bad Sunday for Mercedes overall, though, and they have a comfortable lead in second place in the constructors' standings coming out of this weekend. For Racing Bulls and Haas, a little bit of a mixed bag with the results for their drivers. Both had some unfortunate retirements. Liam Lawson was forced to retire thanks to a hole in his side pod caused from that lap 1 incident with Jack Doohan. Nothing he really could have done to avoid that from happening. So an unfortunate result for him coming out of this Sunday. For Haas, Ollie Behrman was looking fairly strong, just on the edge of the points, but then had an engine failure that forced him to retire too. So another unfortunate result for him for this Sunday. On the bright side, though, Isaac Hadjar finished P11, Esteban Ocon finished P12. Of course, not in the points, but not a bad result for both of these midfield teams. A weekend to forget for Aston Martin and Sauber. For Aston, both of these cars finished a lap down. Fernando Alonso had a moment spinning out on his own in the same part of the track where he had his crash on Sunday. But man, is this car slow. It's clear they are really mailing it in this season and putting everything into 2026, which again is the right decision for this team, especially with Adrian Newey in the building. But if you're an Aston Martin fan, maybe just don't watch the races this year, or maybe just find a new favorite team for the next 6 months, because it's not good for them right now. And the way things are looking, I would be shocked if they even score a point this season. For Sauber, a similar outcome for Nico Hülkenberg, just not having any pace. He also finished the race a lap down and just struggled around this track. Same with his teammate Gabriel Bortoleto, but he also retired with an engine failure halfway through the race. But even without that, he probably would have also finished a lap down. Another team that is clearly looking towards 2026, but unfortunately for them, they don't have the hope of someone like Adrian Newey fixing all of their problems. I want to finish with some thoughts on the Miami Grand Prix and just the circuit in general. This track has received a lot of criticism since its debut in 2022, and it was warranted. There was no grip the first 2 years. We didn't get a lot of passing. The one-stop strategy made it kind of uneventful. But that's over now. This is a good racing track. We come out of so many race weekends complaining about how cars can't pass each other, and we had so many overtakes this weekend at numerous parts of the track. Turn 1 is great. We see so many overtakes or near overtakes that lead to wheel-to-wheel racing coming out of that corner. And it seems like there's always some great action at the start of a race with all of those cars funneling into that tight section. And it took a few years to get it, but the weather variability and rain showers popping up out of nowhere adds such an exciting twist. I don't want to hear the criticism anymore. If you're still complaining about this race, you need to look in the mirror and realize you just don't like the American influence that has come to this sport the last 5 or 6 years. The Miami Grand Prix is here to stay, and it deserves to stay. All right, that's a wrap on today's episode recapping the Miami Grand Prix weekend. An exciting weekend for Formula One. Great qualifying sessions, an eventful sprint race, and an exciting race on Sunday. I will, of course, be back. We have next week off, but we are off to Imola after that. So I'll be back at least before that race weekend with a race preview episode, but there's a chance I might be back before that. I'll have to monitor this whole Alpine situation with Jack Doohan and Franco Colapinto, so watch out for that. But thank you to everyone for tuning in and listening. Till next time.